Now with the white pieces, we can finally play our King's Indian attack. And this is the second time in a row we've seen e5, which just blunders a pawn right out of the opening. And I think the best way to just look at why this is a blunder and not just some sort of like inaccuracy is because let's just see how the game progresses when they're down a central pawn. And this actually highlights a few things. So it highlights, first off, the importance of central control. And also it highlights, so yeah, they're going for an attack that doesn't really work out. F2, we can just defend it by castling. Now our rook is defending the square. We could have also played e3. Doesn't really make sense to waste time like that because it doesn't really help with our development. But we're going to see mainly what goes wrong when someone has less space in the center. So let's play d3. This is kind of encouraging them to take on f2. Because I don't really think this is a good move. If they take on f2, they do get an equal amount of material exchanged. And maybe, hey, maybe it's actually the best way to play, because if they do that, then they create some sort of imbalance in the position when we are up a clean pawn here. But they don't go for that, so we don't really have to worry anyways. Now I want to go c4 instead of e4. We could also try to go knight d2 and e4. But we have to be flexible with our plans. And opening up this bishop when it's uncontested makes things a lot easier for us. So yeah, d takes c4. Rook takes, queen takes d1, rook takes d1. And yeah, if any, like knight e4 or knight g4, we still have e3. Which they still go for. Which is fair. It's just really not going to work out, unfortunately. And for this reason, arguably, maybe we shouldn't have allowed that even. We could have also played queen a4 check to pick up the pawn and maintain our structure, where we just try to target b7. But arguably, we're still doing that here. I'm going to play knight d2. Oh, maybe I should play h3, just to prevent any bishop g4s. Yeah, let's do that. Let's play h3 to prevent anything there. I don't want to play knight c3 because this weakens our pawn structure after knight takes c3, b takes c3. So knight to d2 is more tempting. Also now a3 is popping in my head, because if I play a3, I'm threatening b4 and bishop b2, developing like this instead. Which I think is extremely helpful for us as well. So I'm going to do this to start. If they go knight a5, I think I'll go knight d2 to defend c4 and b3, so there's no b4 knight b3 complications. I'm really, really interested in making sure there aren't any complications to speak of, because we're up a pawn, right? When you're up a pawn, you can generally just, or not just the pawn, but if you're up any sort of material, the less imbalances there are, the more it matters that you're up material. Because then the only imbalance is that material imbalance, right? But if somehow there's more to speak of, then that can become an issue. So do I play c5 here? Kick the bishop even further? It's not a bad idea. Bishop to e7, bishop to b2. We don't need it yet. Let's play knight to, or bishop to b2. I really want to play knight c3. Maybe even knight d4. Getting the long diagonal, just developing pieces is kind of the best thing we can do in a position. So. Alright, so f4, I believe we can just take this. And there's actually a good question. So if c5, bishop to e5, I don't think we have to worry. I think we can just take it with the knight, and then after knight takes, we just continue on with our development. Generally getting that type of exchange in would be good for us. It is nice to keep imbalances if we can. That would be creating an imbalance because we would be getting the bishop pair, but that's a good imbalance. Whereas something like giving up the bishop pair for a pawn could be where we call the pawn compensation for that. So yeah, so f4 again, since we took it, we're up 2 pawns. We're just going to continue on with development. I want to play this as solid as possible to highlight how big of a problem this really is for our opponents, or our opponent. So bishop f5, we'll play knight c3, offering a trade. This exchange would be very good for us. We could also play something like rook e1, because then we can bring the other rook to d1, so we get both rooks in the game. But I'm still undecided if I want to play c5. And the good thing is, c5 is always something our opponent will have to think about. So why make the move immediately when it could actually be stronger later on? Like, let's just say our opponent plays knight e7. This could be a move that someone would think about to reroute it to the king side, or just prepare to give it more activity somehow. It's just not a good move, though, because c5 would win the piece. Whereas if we play c5 and they play bishop e7, it's not really giving them that opportunity to mess up. So, since we are aware of c5, maybe our opponent is too, but if we play c5, our opponent's definitely going to be aware of it. So it just makes sense to have that in reserve. Okay. So what would our opponent be thinking of here? What would our opponent be thinking of playing? I'm not sure. Maybe taking on c3. This is really speaking to me. Yeah, and that's actually what ends up getting played. So looks like we can see the future. But again, since we got another... actually, this is our first exchange of minor pieces. Since we got that, things are slowly becoming more and more clear. Yeah, so after this move, I'm thinking c5 finally, right? To defend the pawn. This makes sense to me. And I want to play knight d4, but I also want to play rook e1, just to ask what's going on with the e-file here. All of a sudden, if our opponent plays something a little offbeat, they could run into trouble. And I think they already run into trouble. Bishop c4, I think, is the only move. Because we were threatening b5 winning the bishop if they move their bishop to something like f7. What if we play knight d2, though? Does this not still win? After knight to d2, we're threatening bishop takes c6 and rook takes e7. And even though we're creating some imbalances, we're getting too big of a material gain for those imbalances to matter. When it's a pawn, it's a lot different. But when it's a piece, things start to be a lot more clear. Yeah, so I think we can take on c6 and be pretty happy about that. The only thing to watch out for is we have potential light square weaknesses, but it's just not really possible when, or to take advantage of, just because, well, we do still have a knight that could defend the light squares, and also it's really hard to visualize some sort of coordination where that actually works out for them. But never say never. So we got to be on the lookout. And that is what being on the lookout is seeing, okay, they have a light square bishop and I don't. So could problems arise? Possibly. Here I think it's going to be mate now though. So they'll play king h8 and rook g6 check. We'll deliver mate by force because when we give a check on the g file and we stay on the g file, their king can't move back. And so they have to just block with their rooks because of our bishop. So either bishop or rook d4 or rook f6 will have to be played. Either way, we take both pieces. We can pre-move this one because it's not guaranteed they'll play rook d4. So if we pre-move rook to bishop to d4 and they actually played rook f6, that would be a problem. And that's game over. So that was a pretty good game, and I think a bit more instructive than the last one where it almost immediately ended after. But this is kind of the strength of having an extra pawn, is in this position, again, generally a pawn is worth 1 point of material, but it is worth 1 point. There are other things going on than just the fact that, okay, I'm +1. As we can see here, the engine gives me plus 2.2. And the big reason why is because, well, I'm also ahead in development. I'm ready to castle, which I did. But importantly, it's a central pawn, and I'm going to have a lot of central control. And central control is a big deal. And having the imbalance just be they have less control and I have more is not really good for them. So d3, knight f6, c4. Again, dc4, I could probably play queen c4 or queen a4 check and then pick up the pawn, but supposedly everything was good here. Knight d4 was playable. I didn't really see anything immediately wrong with e3. One thing to worry about is some sort of like bishop g4, knight g5. We don't have to worry because we have h3. I played this as prophylaxis right after, so I can prepare development with moves like knight to d2 or even a3, b4. And yeah, essentially what just happened in the game is I had more control and it was just a problem, right? This extra pawn, even though it might not be the most active extra pawn, it's still really annoying. And that kind of just makes things easier for us, and it's just easier to play. And that's the game.